Zina pressed her back against the cold stone walls of the servant quarters, trying to stifle the whirlwind of emotions unraveling inside her. At 18, she was no stranger to hardship. Life had shown her that hope, much like the fraying wallpaper in their tiny room, often peeled away to reveal nothing but cracks beneath. Her mother, Neema, worked tirelessly under the oppressive reign of Madam Eloise, the matriarch of the grand estate. Although they had a roof over their heads, Zina always felt a sense of displacement lingering around them. It was as if each breath they took in the huge mansion came at a cost. "One more load of laundry, my dear," Neema said softly that morning, wiping the perspiration from her brow. "Then you can go study. I know you want to keep up your reading." Zina nodded. She had gleaned her love of books from neighbors who donated old paperbacks every once in a while. She clung to these stories like precious jewels, reading them by candlelight whenever she had a free moment. Yet, in the back of her mind, she wondered if her own life would ever turn into a captivating tale, one filled with triumph. Right now, the only story she lived was that of a servant's daughter, pressed into the service of a household that displayed more greed than generosity. Although the staff spoke in hushed, fearful tones about Madam Eloise's cold stares and quick temper, they also whispered in admiration of her fortune. She came from old money. Everything Eloise touched, her gilded candelabras, her extravagant china, and even her rose garden, seemed to radiate wealth and status. Meanwhile, Zina felt she barely had the right to walk on the same polished floors. That morning, Eloise's tall figure appeared at the servants' entrance with swift determination. Dressed in a fitted navy blue suit, hair pinned back in an elegant chignon, she glared at Neema and Zina as if they were pests. "I want every window polished to perfection," Eloise snapped, her voice echoing through the corridor. "You live here free of charge, so I expect no laziness in return." Without waiting for a response, she stormed away, the faint tap of her heels diminishing into the distance. Zina bristled but bit her tongue. She had heard her mother warn her repeatedly, "Stay quiet, do your work, keep the peace." But standing there, a spark of defiance flickered in Zina's mind. "Is this all there is for us, forever?" Neema touched her shoulder gently. "Zina, don't let it get to you." "I won't, Mama," Zina lied, turning away to begin the chores. She balanced a stack of laundry in her arms, the rough fabric scratching her skin. Each step felt heavier than the last, a reminder of how quickly an innocent girl could be thrown to the wolves in this mansion of secrets. Little did Zina realize that the winds of change were already blowing toward her, carrying the promise of both heartache and unexpected fortitude. In the coming weeks, life would unveil a path she never imagined, testing her spirit in ways she couldn't foresee. Late afternoon sunlight poured in through the mansion's high windows, illuminating flecks of dust that drifted lazily in the air. Zina was on her knees scrubbing the marble floors of one of the guest lounges. The sweet, soapy scent of lavender floor cleaner mingled with the dryness of the day. As she scrubbed, her back ached from labor, and her mind wandered to the future. She wondered about the world beyond these walls. Someday, maybe, she'd have her own place, a quaint home where she and her mother would be treated with the dignity they deserved. She heard footsteps approaching. Quickly, Zina lowered her gaze, expecting to see Eloise's black pumps. But these footsteps were different, lighter, hesitant. She looked up to see a tall young man, perhaps a few years older than her, dressed in a crisp linen shirt and dark trousers. He stared at his reflection in the ornate gilded mirror that dominated the wall. There was something in his eyes, an emptiness or perhaps confusion. Zina had never seen him before, which struck her as odd. She thought she knew everyone in the household. Their eyes met in the reflection. She flushed with embarrassment and cast her gaze downward, half expecting him to bark at her or order her to leave. Instead, he turned around and offered a polite, if somewhat curious, smile. "You must be the housekeeper's daughter," he said, voice warm. "I'm Damien." Zina struggled to find her voice. "Why yes. I'm Zina." He studied her for a moment, and she noticed his features, brown eyes, neatly cropped dark hair, an air of quiet confidence. Yet there was a tension in his posture, as if his wealthy upbringing pressed upon his shoulders like a heavy cloak. Damien took a step closer, then crouched down to speak at eye level, which momentarily startled her. "Sorry if I scared you." He glanced around. "I just got back from abroad. My father sent me to get a business degree in Europe. I hardly recognize this place anymore." Zina offered a polite nod. "I didn't know Madam Eloise's son was away," she managed, not knowing what else to say. Damien shrugged. "Eloise is my stepmother, not my mother. My father, well, let's just say he's rarely around. I decided to visit for a while." An awkward pause ensued. Zina wasn't sure how to navigate this conversation. Servants didn't typically talk much with the family. But Damien's tone seemed genuine. Finally, he nodded toward the bucket of water beside her. "Need a hand?" She blinked in surprise. "No, I can manage," she said quickly, trying to hide her embarrassment. "I'm used to it." He stood back up and stuffed his hands into his pockets. "Well, if you need anything, or want a break, just let me know," he said with a half smile that made something flutter in Zina's chest. Before she could respond, he exited the lounge, his footsteps receding down the hall. Later that evening, as Zina replayed the encounter in her mind, she felt a strange mix of curiosity and caution. She didn't know whether to trust this wealthy heir who had breezed back into the estate like a gust of foreign wind. Yet something about the way he looked at her, in that mirror, made her wonder if there was more to him than a privileged upbringing. Little did she know, this was just the first of many encounters that would complicate her life in ways she could never have predicted. Night draped itself over the mansion, a curtain of inky darkness split by the pale moonlight. Zina had finished her chores and was heading to her room when she passed by one of the living chambers reserved for guests. The door stood slightly ajar. Inside, the glow of a small lamp revealed Damien sprawled on a velvet couch, flipping through a magazine. Something compelled her to linger by the door. She knew it was inappropriate, but an odd curiosity tugged at her. What kind of person reads alone at this hour? She remembered that Eloise had dismissed the rest of the staff earlier. Zina was often the last to finish her duties, out of necessity. Before she could decide to move on, Damien glanced up. Their eyes met. "Zina," he called softly. She hovered at the door. "Sorry, I was just..." Damien set the magazine aside. "Come in. Unless you have somewhere to be." Zina hesitated, a swirl of anxiety and intrigue coiling in her stomach. I should probably get to my room," she stuttered. Just for a moment, Damien insisted, standing. "Please." Against her better judgment, Zina stepped inside. The room smelled of expensive cologne mingled with the faint aroma of brandy from a glass near the table. Damien gestured for her to sit on a plush chair. Reluctantly, she complied, folding her hands in her lap. "How long have you lived here?" he asked, taking a seat across from her. She exhaled, momentarily letting her guard down. "All my life. My mother has been a housekeeper here for over 2 decades. I was practically raised in this mansion." "You're the only child of your father, right?" Damien nodded slowly. "Yes. I was actually surprised to see how much my stepmother changed around here. She's invested heavily in decor, sometimes for appearance's sake. Or maybe to overshadow the gloom that's always followed her." He sighed, as though the weight of his lineage pressed on him. "Zina, do you ever dream of leaving this place?" That question, so unexpected, pierced a part of her heart. "Every day," she whispered, allowing a vulnerability to surface she rarely showed. "But, it's complicated." Damien studied her, his expression thoughtful. "If you ever do decide to leave, I hope you find what you're looking for. Life outside isn't perfect," but he broke off as if losing the right words. The electricity in the room suddenly felt palpable, a flicker of something intangible passing between them. Without warning, the door flew open. Standing there was Eloise, her face twisted with rage, eyes darting from Damien to Zina as if she'd caught them in a scandalous act. Zina shot up from her seat, cheeks burning. "And Madam Eloise?" Eloise said nothing, only stared for a long moment. Then she cleared her throat, her voice slicing through the tension. "Damien, your father wants to speak with you. Zina, go to your quarters." No explanation. No direct accusation. Yet the bitterness underlying those words made Zina's blood run cold. She hurried from the room, heart pounding in her ears. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the strange moment with Damien, and the even stranger reaction from Eloise. She couldn't help but sense that something had shifted, as if she were no longer invisible but had become a central figure in a story best left untold. It was as though the silk sheets and grand tapestries of the mansion were embroidering a far darker tale beneath their ornate surface. A week later, Zina found herself standing on the mansion's second-floor balcony, overlooking the sprawling garden below. A gentle breeze ruffled the leaves of the towering oak trees. The setting sun cast a warm, golden hue over everything, lending a momentary sense of peace that contrasted starkly with the turmoil inside her. Damien had been trying to speak with her in private. Every day, he found an excuse to pass by her chores or catch her in a quiet hallway. Her mother warned her to be cautious, reminding her that Eloise was watching. But there was a part of Zina that yearned for something beyond the monotony of domestic life. Maybe Damien represented a glimpse of that unexplored world. That evening, he approached her on the balcony, leaning against the stone railing with a subdued smile. "I was hoping we could talk," he said. Zina nodded, keeping her voice low. "About what?" She refused to meet his gaze, afraid of what she might see there. He hesitated. "I feel stuck. My father wants me to take over part of his company, but my heart isn't in it. I traveled to Europe hoping to find purpose, but I only found more confusion." He paused, eyes scanning her face. "You seem so genuine. There's a purity to you, Zina, that I don't see often in the circles I've been in. I just thought you should know that." Her cheeks warmed at the compliment. "I'm not as pure as you think," she murmured. "I'm just trapped, the same as you." He glanced over the balcony edge, where the meticulously manicured garden spread out below. "I think we could help each other, maybe just as friends." He reached out, lightly touching her hand. It felt like a secret promise forming in that twilight moment. A flutter of hope stirred in Zina's chest. Could he really be this sincere? A fleeting daydream of going to college, building a life for herself, and escaping the mansion's suffocating corridors crossed her mind. She allowed herself to imagine for just a second that Damien might truly care, that his words could be the key to a locked door in her future. "I'll try," she whispered, turning her hand so that it met his. "But we have to be careful. Eloise." "Don't worry," he said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "I'll protect you. My father will be back soon, and everything will be different. I'll talk to him about you." "About how he stopped, as if catching himself from saying too much. "Let's just say I'm not going anywhere without you." In that suspended moment, Zina felt a naive comfort in his assurance. He had offered her a promise that glowed brighter than the fiery sun sinking below the horizon. Little did she know, the vow was as fleeting as the day's last light, a promise never truly meant to hold against the coming darkness. The next day, a hush seemed to fall over the entire mansion. The servants, typically chatty when Eloise was out of earshot, exchanged nervous glances. Zina couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was as though the mansion itself breathed rumors, exhaling them into every corridor. At midday, when Zina went to the kitchen to help prepare lunch for Eloise and her esteemed guests, she overheard hushed voices. Two staff members, Farida, the old cook, and Leon, the chauffeur, were talking near the pantry, their faces tense with secrecy. "Did you hear?" Farida whispered. "Damien has been seen talking to the girl every night. Madam Eloise found them on the balcony yesterday." Leon let out a slow, dramatic sigh. "I heard. Rumor has it Eloise is furious. She's sworn to keep an eye on them, if only to prevent any embarrassment to the family name." Zina's heart hammered in her chest. She realized they were talking about her. She struggled to maintain composure as she continued slicing vegetables, her motions robotic, mind racing. Farida's voice dropped even lower. "She's had her personal assistant follow them. Word is, she'll do something drastic if it goes any further." With that, Leon lifted a brow. "We should keep out of it. I don't want to lose my job, or worse. Eloise can be ruthless." They noticed Zina at the chopping board and froze. She kept her gaze down, pretending not to have heard a thing. Nonetheless, her stomach twisted into knots. She exited the kitchen as soon as she could, carrying a tray of juice glasses toward the main lounge, where the guests gathered. As she set down the tray, Eloise's voice floated toward her, crisp as a winter breeze. "Zina, you're done here for now. Go check the guest rooms for towels." Though the instruction was mundane, her tone bristled with underlying tension. Zina bowed her head in compliance, excusing herself. Her entire being felt on high alert, like prey sensing a hunter's presence. Outside the lounge, she closed her eyes for a moment to steady her breath. "Are you okay?" a soft voice spoke from behind. Zina turned to see Damien, a concerned expression etched onto his face. He lightly grasped her elbow and guided her into a quiet corner. "I heard Mother's been watching us. If it's too dangerous for you." "I'll be fine," Zina interjected, a stubborn resolve coloring her tone. "Just be careful. She's already spreading rumors. I don't want you to get in trouble." Damien's eyes darkened. "We haven't done anything wrong. I won't let her intimidate you or your mother. Believe me, Zina." He might have believed his own words in that moment, but they both knew Eloise's anger was a tempest that could sweep them all away. Whispers were turning into open accusations, and soon, a single spark would set the entire mansion ablaze with scandal. Dawn broke with a fierce, howling wind that rattled the mansion's windows. Rain battered the tiled rooftop, lightning flashed across the sky, and thunder boomed in the distance. Zina awoke to the storm's roar, feeling a similar turbulence churning in her gut. She had felt unwell for days, nausea in the mornings, dizzy spells in the afternoons. She brushed it off as exhaustion from late-night chores. But something deeper gnawed at her. A suspicion that made her tremble whenever the thought surfaced. Could it be? That morning, she was tasked with dusting the study, a large room cluttered with antique books and an oversized mahogany desk. As she methodically wiped down shelves, a sudden wave of dizziness hit her. She staggered, clutching at the corner of a bookshelf to remain upright. Her heart hammered against her ribs, cold sweat beading on her forehead. A moment later, Neema entered, face lined with worry. "Zina, you look pale. Sit down." Zina sank into a nearby chair, breathing deeply. Across from her, a portrait of Eloise glowered from the wall, as if personally condemning her for some unspoken offense. She swallowed hard, her eyes brimming with tears. "Mama, I need to tell you something," she whispered, voice trembling. Neema kneeled beside her, eyes full of compassion. "Tell me, child." A choked sob escaped Zina's throat. I think I might be pregnant." The words hit Neema like a slap. Her eyes widened, then filled with sorrow. She clasped Zina's hands, her own trembling. "Oh, Zina, are you sure?" Zina nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I haven't had a test, but the signs." "Mama, I'm so scared." If Eloise finds out, if she suspects that Damien is the father. The storm raged outside, thunder shaking the walls as if echoing her dread. Neema closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her composure. "We'll figure this out," she said, voice quivering. "First, you must confirm it. Then we'll decide what to do. We can't let anyone, especially Eloise, know until we have a plan." Heavy-footed steps thundered down the hallway. Suddenly, the door to the study flung open, revealing Eloise in a pale green bathrobe, eyes alight with fury. "What's going on in here?" she demanded. "Why are you sitting around, Zina? Get back to work. And Neema, I need my breakfast tray in 10 minutes. "Yes. Madam," Neema said quietly, standing up. She shot Zina a reassuring glance before hastening out. Zina rose shakily, fighting the whirlwind of fear and uncertainty that threatened to consume her. She knew the storm inside her was only just beginning. The real tempest would arrive when the secret she carried, Damien's secret, was inevitably unleashed. And, as with all secrets, it wouldn't remain hidden for long. A week passed in excruciating tension. Zina managed to sneak away one morning to a small clinic far from the estate, accompanied by her mother. The test results only confirmed what she already suspected: she was pregnant with Damien's child. She confronted Damien that evening in a little-used corridor lined with ancient portraits. The eyes of ancestral figures seemed to watch them from centuries past, silent witnesses to the drama unfolding. "What are we going to do?" Zina asked, voice trembling, her eyes pleading with Damien. I can't hide this forever." Damien's face went ashen. He exhaled a shaky breath. I don't know." A flicker of hurt crossed Zina's features. "You promised me that you'd talk to your father, that you'd protect me." "I said a lot of things," Damien shot back, a tremor in his voice that betrayed his panic. I didn't think this would happen. I never," he broke off, running a hand through his hair. A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant hum of the household staff bustling about their chores. Zina felt tears welling. "So you're going to abandon me? You're just going to pretend this never happened?" "No. That's not what I'm saying," he insisted, though his eyes darted around as if searching for an escape. "I just need time. My father's in the middle of a major deal. He'll kill me if he finds out. But I'll figure something out. I swear." Zina wanted to believe him, but doubt weighed heavily in her chest. She recalled the promise he'd made, that they would face the world together. Now, it felt as though she stood on the edge of a precipice, alone, with no one to catch her if she fell. Later that night, her worst fears materialized. Eloise stormed into their cramped quarters, accompanied by 2 security guards. Neema jumped up from the small dining table, alarmed. Zina stood, heart hammering. "You worthless leeches!" Eloise hissed, eyes blazing. "How dare you ensnare my stepson? You thought you could climb the social ladder by trapping him with a child?" Her shrill voice stabbed through Zina's ears. Zina opened her mouth to protest, tears threatening to spill. "It's not like that," she cried. It. "Shut your mouth." Eloise spat. "Pack your things and get out. Both of you. Your employment is terminated, Neema. I'm throwing you out for this disgusting betrayal. I have no place in my home for shameless opportunists." Neema broke down in tears. "Please, we have nowhere to go." Eloise gave a cold sneer. "That's not my problem. You thought your daughter could fool us all, but I'm not blind. I will not have my family name sullied by a servant girl. And you," she turned on Zina, voice dripping with hatred, "if you ever try to lay claim to anything in this house, anything from Damien, you regret it. Now get out of my sight." With that, she signaled the guards, who shoved Zina and Neema out into the corridor. They barely had time to gather their meager belongings. Zina caught one last glimpse of the polished marble floors, the glint of chandeliers overhead, and the imposing portrait of Eloise in the foyer. As they were marched out into the rain-soaked courtyard, Zina saw Damien standing near the entrance, watching wordlessly, his face a mask of guilt and fear. She cried out his name, but he said nothing. In that moment, shame felt like a physical weight. She was being dragged through the mud, both literally and metaphorically, for having dared to believe in a future that someone like Eloise would never allow. Mother and daughter stepped out of the mansion's gate into the rainy darkness, no job, no shelter, and a new life on the horizon, one shaped by betrayal and heartbreak they couldn't yet fathom. Hours later, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Zina and Neema huddled under a small awning in a deserted part of town. The rain had soaked through their clothes, and a chill wind cut through the night air. Zina still clutched a small cloth bag filled with the few possessions they owned, mostly threadbare clothes and a battered old children's dictionary that Zina had grown up reading. Neither of them spoke. Every time Zina opened her mouth to form words, tears sprang to her eyes, rendering her speechless. Finally, her mother broke the silence. "We'll find a place to stay," Neema said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Zina merely nodded. She was numb. Her pregnancy was no longer just a suspicion but a concrete reality, one that made her future terrifyingly uncertain. She pictured Damien's face again, the way he couldn't even open his mouth to defend her. Anger laced with sorrow churned within her. As the rain subsided, they ventured into the streets, searching for any sign of lodging. Cheap motels were full or wouldn't accept them without upfront cash. Homeless shelters had no free beds. Eventually, they found refuge in a dilapidated building whose caretaker took pity on them, offering a small corner for the night in exchange for cleaning tasks. The musty scent of mold filled their makeshift room. It was hardly bigger than a storage closet, and water dripped from a leaky ceiling. Zina could hear scuttling noises in the walls, rats, she presumed. Sleep was elusive. She lay awake, thinking of the mansion's warmth and recalling how she used to complain about living in the cramped servant quarters. Now, those quarters seemed like a distant luxury. Morning arrived with a dull gray sky. Neema insisted that Zina stay indoors while she tried to find any kind of job in the neighborhood. Zina, worried about her mother, was torn between going with her and taking care of her own fragile condition. In the end, she obeyed, spending her day trying to fix the leak in their room and rest when possible. That evening, Neema returned, shoulders sagging, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "No luck," she said quietly. "But there's a church nearby that runs a soup kitchen. Maybe we can eat there tomorrow." The next few days bled into a cycle of hunger, footsore wandering, and fruitless job searches. The salt of their tears seemed to permeate every meal when they had one. Zina quickly learned that life on the streets was a ruthless teacher. Every compassionate stranger was offset by another who looked at them with scorn or distrust. Yet a small spark of determination ignited in Zina each time she felt despair creeping. She was carrying life within her. As the reality of her pregnancy took root, so did a fierce will to protect the child. She had once dreamed of rising above her station, but never under such dire circumstances. Now, her biggest aspiration was simply survival for her and her mother. What she didn't know was that fate had plans far bigger than mere survival, plans that would ultimately reshape her destiny. Early one morning, after another sleepless night, Zina and Neema ventured to a small park in search of a bench where they could rest and gather their thoughts. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, painting the sky in soft pink and gold. Exhausted, they collapsed onto a wooden bench near a sculpture of a local hero. Zina winced, feeling faint from hunger. "Mama, I'll be right back," Zina said. "I'm going to the soup kitchen across the street." Neema nodded, closing her eyes. Over the past week, her mother looked as though she'd aged 10 years, the lines of worry etched deeper with each passing day. Zina walked slowly, her steps unsteady. She was halfway to the soup kitchen when she noticed a tall man in a crisp gray suit approach Neema. Concerned, she hurried back, ready to defend her mother if necessary. As she neared, she caught snippets of their conversation. "I'm sorry, sir," Neema was saying, "we don't have anything. We just..." The man held up a hand. "Please, ma'am, I'm not here to harm you. My name is Mr. BORRAH. I run a foundation that helps women in vulnerable situations." He produced a folded newspaper from under his arm. "I was reading about a training program in the city when I saw you two here." Zina stopped at a distance, observing carefully. The man's tone was gentle, free of condescension. He wore a sympathetic expression, as if he genuinely cared. Neema, however, appeared wary. "We've been lied to before," she whispered. "How can we be sure?" Mr. BORRAH sighed, sensing her fear. "I understand. The world can be cruel. But my foundation aims to assist, not exploit. I can take you to our facility if you'd like. It's a place where women can learn job skills and receive basic housing. We are not a charity shelter, exactly. We focus on empowerment." Zina stepped forward cautiously, clearing her throat. "Excuse me, sir." She hesitated, searching his face for any hint of deception. "Why help strangers like us?" Mr. BORRAH held her gaze. "Because I was once in a dire situation myself. Someone helped me when I had nowhere to turn. I made it my mission to pass on that kindness." It sounded too good to be true. Yet something in his demeanor felt genuine, a stark contrast to the cold stares and rebukes they had faced recently. Zina glanced at her mother, who looked equally torn. Mr. BORRAH noticed their apprehension. "There's no pressure. Here's my card," he said, extending a simple white business card with an address and phone number. "If you decide you want help, come by. If not, I wish you well." With that, he tucked the newspaper under his arm and offered a friendly nod, strolling off into the park's tree-lined pathway. Zina and Neema exchanged a glance, hearts pounding with a renewed glimmer of hope. Could this be a lifeline? Or just another mirage? In the end, they decided that taking a chance on Mr. BORRAH's offer was better than slowly wasting away in the streets. Little did they know, this seemingly random encounter would pivot their fortunes in a way they never dreamed possible, setting Zina on a path toward a destiny that would eventually collide once more with Damien and the powerful family she had left behind. The facility they arrived at was modest but welcoming, an older building painted in pastel blues, with hand-drawn murals of smiling women and children on the walls. Above the entrance, a sign read, "BORRAH Women's Empowerment Center." Mr. BORRAH met them at the front office. His smile was kind but not overbearing, and he led them through a quick orientation. The center offered vocational training programs, ranging from sewing and tailoring to cooking and catering skills. There was also a rudimentary dormitory for women in crisis. "It's not luxurious," he warned gently, leading them through the dorm's narrow hallway. "But you'll have a bed, warm meals, and the chance to learn skills that can help you become independent." Zina felt a lump in her throat. The dorm rooms were plain, furnished with bunk beds and shared closets. But it was infinitely better than the damp corner in the rundown building they'd left behind. Most importantly, she wouldn't have to worry about her mother's safety every night. "Thank you," Neema said quietly, tears brimming in her eyes. "We won't waste this opportunity." Zina nodded, resting a hand on her slightly swollen belly. She hadn't revealed her pregnancy to Mr. BORRAH yet, but she suspected it wouldn't be a surprise for long. Over the next few days, mother and daughter began to acclimate to the center's rhythm. In the mornings, they attended workshops. Neema gravitated toward learning basic bookkeeping skills, something she had never had the chance to do in the mansion. Zina, on the other hand, joined a culinary class. Her years of assisting in the mansion's kitchen gave her a foundation, but she discovered a new passion for creating pastries and savory dishes. Perhaps I can open a small catering business someday, she daydreamed. At night, Zina would collapse into the bunk bed, exhausted but oddly hopeful. For the first time in her life, she felt like her days had purpose beyond cleaning floors and dusting chandeliers. She was learning something that could potentially open doors. More importantly, the sense of community at the center comforted her. She met other young women who had been cast aside by society, each with a harrowing story of survival. Sharing these experiences bonded them like sisters. Still, Zina had moments of fear, worrying about the future, about raising a child without a father, and about how Eloise might retaliate if she ever found out that Zina was rebuilding her life. She didn't want to dwell on Damien. The bitter memory of his betrayal stung, but she tried to focus on the future. One evening, Mr. BORRAH caught up with her after class. "Zina, I'm impressed by your progress. You have a knack for cooking," he said with a gentle smile. "Have you considered specializing in catering? We offer an advanced program for that." Zina blinked, a small flame of excitement flickering to life. "That would be amazing," she breathed. "But, can I really do it?" I'm pregnant," she finally admitted. "It might be hard to continue once my belly grows, and then after the baby is born." Mr. BORRAH's expression remained kind. "We have childcare options in partnership with a neighboring facility. If you want this, Zina, we'll help you see it through." Overwhelmed by a surge of gratitude, Zina smiled through tears. Maybe this is what it feels like to be supported, she thought. In that moment, she vowed to take every opportunity to build a better life. She had been broken by shame and betrayal, but she was determined to rebuild with her own two hands, even if they were still trembling with the memory of where she came from. 2 months passed in a flurry of lessons and practical sessions. Zina's baby bump was more pronounced now, and she occasionally felt light flutters of movement within her belly. Each flutter reminded her why she was working so hard and pushing through the exhaustion. Her cooking skills advanced quickly. She learned to craft intricate pastries, marinate meats to perfection, and whip up sauces that delighted even the center's strictest instructors. Her inherent passion and creativity shone through in every dish. Word spread among the center staff about Zina's culinary talents, and soon she was assisting in small catering gigs run by the foundation to generate income. One sunny afternoon, Mr. BORRAH approached Zina, a clipboard in hand and a broad grin stretching across his face. "Zina, how would you feel about spearheading our next community catering event?" he asked. Her eyes went wide. "Me? But I'm still learning." Mr. BORRAH placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've learned more in 2 months than many do in 6. Plus, you have a natural leadership quality. Don't sell yourself short." Zina's mother, who had been helping out at the center's small administrative desk, overheard and came over. Neema's pride was evident in her tearful smile. "You should do it, my child. You'll be wonderful." Boosted by their confidence, Zina took on the challenge. For weeks, she immersed herself in planning menus, budgeting ingredients, and even styling plating concepts for the event. The day of the catering event arrived, held in a local community hall. Zina's team served beautifully presented canapés, savory pies, and delicate desserts to a large crowd, including local business people who supported the center. The event was a resounding success. People asked, "Who's in charge of this spread?" "It's fantastic." Whenever someone pointed to Zina, she felt a rush of exhilaration she hadn't known before. "I'm not just the housekeeper's daughter anymore," she thought, blinking back happy tears. In the aftermath, a local newspaper wrote a brief piece praising the center's catering program, mentioning Zina by name. It was the first time her efforts had ever been acknowledged publicly. As she scanned the article, she couldn't help but feel a pang of regret that her child's father would never see it, or if he did, he might not care. But if heartbreak had taught Zina anything, it was that she couldn't rely on someone else for her identity or future. With each achievement and new skill, she was finally beginning to rise from the ashes of her past. She might have been the forgotten girl in a mansion of wealth, but now she was forging her own path, one step at a time. Back at the opulent estate, far from Zina's new life, Damien was sliding down a steep path of self-destruction. After his father discovered the scandal involving the housekeeper's daughter, the patriarch distanced himself, refusing to offer Damien the position he'd once promised in the family business. Rumors circulated that Eloise had painted the entire fiasco as Zina's fault, accusing her of seducing Damien. But in the father's eyes, Damien was weak and irresponsible, a tarnish on the family name. Stripped of financial support and plagued by guilt, Damien tried to salvage his reputation by launching a small import-export venture with a friend. Yet, his inexperience and impulsive choices soon led to mounting debts. He turned to gambling, hoping for a quick fix. Nights were spent at smoky backroom poker games, and days blurred into a haze of desperation. Eventually, Eloise cut him off entirely, claiming he was a lost cause. "You'd be better off leaving town," she hissed during their last confrontation, "before you drag this family name even deeper into the mud." Amid this chaos, Damien found himself missing the simple comfort of Zina's presence, the quiet sincerity she had offered him. The memory of how he had stood silent as she was thrown out haunted him incessantly. He hated himself for his cowardice, for not having the courage to challenge Eloise's wrath. But life rolled on, merciless. Damien's debt climbed, and his so-called friends began to vanish. Day by day, he grew more desperate. One evening, he shuffled into a dingy bar downtown, sank into a booth, and stared at his reflection in the dusty mirror behind the liquor shelves. His eyes looked hollow, ringed with exhaustion and self-loathing. The bartender, an old acquaintance, recognized him. "Damien. Haven't seen you in a while. You don't look too good, man." Damien let out a brittle laugh. "Yeah, well, life didn't exactly go as planned." The bartender shrugged. "That's life for you. You either get up and fight, or you stay down and drown in your own mess." Damien said nothing, merely tracing a finger through the condensation on his beer glass. That night, as he stumbled out of the bar, a sudden downpour drenched him. He realized that he had never truly tasted hardship before. This was new, raw, and terrifying. He wondered where Zina was, if she was okay, if she hated him. The reality was that Zina had long since left the memory of his false promises behind. While she pushed forward with her newfound career, Damien spiraled down, nearing rock bottom. The once glamorous scion of a wealthy entrepreneur was now just a lost young man with nowhere to turn, undone by the same betrayal that had once destroyed Zina's hope. Karma had indeed begun to collect its debts. Zina wiped her sweaty palms on her apron and took a deep breath. She stood backstage in a conference center that buzzed with nervous energy. The city's annual entrepreneur competition was about to begin. Weeks prior, Mr. BORRAH had encouraged her to apply, insisting that her catering concept deserved a platform. Never in her wildest dreams had she expected to be shortlisted. Yet, here she was, wearing a simple but professional black dress and low heels. Her pregnant belly was noticeable under the tailored fabric, but she carried herself with the quiet confidence she'd developed over months of training and small successes. "Contestant number 4, Zina, please come to the stage," an announcer called. Zina felt her heart hammer in her chest as she stepped into the bright lights. Rows of people, including established business owners and city officials, filled the auditorium. In the front row, she spotted Mr. BORRAH smiling encouragingly. Neema sat next to him, tears shining in her eyes. Adjusting the microphone, Zina began, "Good morning, everyone. My name is Zina, and I'm here to present my concept, culinary empowerment. We're a small catering startup that not only provides unique, delectable dishes but also trains women who faced hardship, teaching them a trade and offering a path to independence." The audience listened intently. She showcased photos of her team's successful events, testimonies from clients, and the partnership model with the Women's Empowerment Center. Despite her nerves, her voice rang clear and passionate. At the end of her presentation, the applause was thunderous. As Zina exited the stage, she spotted a familiar figure in the audience, none other than Eloise, seated with a group of influential ladies. The shock almost made her stumble. What is she doing here? A cold sweat broke out on her neck. She remembered the night Eloise had cast her out like garbage. But this was Zina's moment, not Eloise's. With stilled resolve, Zina held her head high and walked past Eloise's wide-eyed stare. After a short intermission, the judges announced the winners. Third place, second place, then first place. When Zina's name was called for first place, she almost couldn't believe it. The audience erupted in cheers as she accepted the trophy and prize money. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not out of sadness but pure elation mixed with vindication. Later, in a reception area, Zina mingled awkwardly with local entrepreneurs who congratulated her. A hush fell as Eloise approached, wearing an elegant red dress, her expression unreadable. So, Eloise said quietly, casting a disdainful glance at Zina's baby bump. You've done well for yourself. Zina's stomach churned, but she forced a polite smile. Yes, thanks to the support of good people. She refused to let Eloise's cold gaze intimidate her again. Eloise's eyes flickered, a mix of anger and grudging respect. Congratulations, she said tersely before walking away to join her entourage. In that single exchange, Zina felt a tectonic shift in their dynamic. She was no longer the powerless servant girl but a rising entrepreneur with a bright future. Karma wears heels, indeed, Zina thought, recalling how Eloise's presence in the front row must have stung. For years, Eloise wore the power of wealth like an impregnable shield. Now, seeing Zina triumphant before the city's elite, that shield had cracks. And this was only the beginning of the reckoning that fate had planned. Months passed. Zina's belly grew round, her due date fast approaching. She managed to keep her catering startup afloat, thanks to the help of her mother and several women she trained at the center. Media interest had spiked after her victory at the entrepreneur competition. Local papers ran stories, and one national channel aired a short segment on her. Zina's personal life, however, remained guarded. She never mentioned the child's father, never recounted the humiliation she'd suffered. But life has a way of unveiling hidden chapters when least expected. One day, a local journalist, impressed by her story of perseverance, arranged for an in-depth interview. Cameras and bright lights filled the foundation's modest courtyard. Zina and Neema sat side by side on a small wooden bench, fielding questions about their journey from homelessness to running a thriving small business. Zina, the journalist asked, leaning forward, the community finds your story inspiring. But many wonder, how did you end up on the streets in the first place? You were pregnant, correct? Zina tensed slightly, choosing her words with care. My mother and I lost our jobs abruptly, she said, omitting details. Yes, I was pregnant. It was a difficult time. But with the support of the center, we managed to rebuild. Neema placed a hand on Zina's arm. It wasn't easy, she said softly. We had nothing. People judged us. But we never gave up. The journalist nodded sympathetically, but Zina sensed more probing questions coming. What about the father of your child? He asked gently. Is he involved? Zina's throat constricted. What do I say? She felt the weight of the camera lens on her, the public's curiosity. No, she finally said, her voice steady but full of unspoken pain. He's not in the picture. My focus now is on raising this child with love and making sure they have a bright future. The journalist accepted the answer, perhaps sensing the raw wound behind it. The interview continued on safer topics, the growth of the catering business, her plans to expand, and her hopes to empower more women. By the time the camera crew left, Zina breathed a sigh of relief, grateful she hadn't been cornered into naming Damien or the wealthy estate. However, fate had a different plan. The interview aired on local TV and went viral on social media. The segment praising a pregnant homeless girl turned entrepreneur caught the eye of many viewers, including some who recognized Zina from her days at the mansion. The rumors began swirling again. Soon, the story took on a life of its own, with online commentators speculating that she was the mother of a rich scion's baby, forcibly evicted to keep quiet. Even though Zina tried to ignore the gossip, she felt the tremors rippling through her new life. But she refused to live in fear. The child she carried was her anchor, the tiny spark that had propelled her to fight for a better tomorrow. And if the world wanted to know the truth, well, maybe it was time for truth to step into the light. As the media frenzy escalated, it wasn't just curious onlookers who wanted answers. Eloise, furious at the resurgence of rumors linking her family to a scandal, pulled strings to suppress the story. But the more she tried, the more public interest grew. Inevitably, lawyers and journalists caught wind of the father's likely identity. With the pressure mounting, a small TV network arranged a sit-down meeting with Zina, promising they only wanted to clarify the story to clear her name, and possibly the family's. It was a televised special. Initially, Zina hesitated, worried about her child's future. But Mr. BORRAH and Neema convinced her that transparency might be the only way to end the speculation once and for all. On the day of the broadcast, Zina arrived at a simple studio in a modest floral dress. Her hands shook as she navigated the set. Bright studio lights beamed down on a sleek couch where she was to be interviewed. This time, the questions wouldn't be so gentle. Halfway through the interview, the host finally broached the question everyone was waiting for. Zina, there's a rumor that the father of your unborn child is from a wealthy, influential family in this city. Can you confirm or deny that? Zina's heart pounded. She swallowed, feeling the eyes of the camera, the host, and the future of her own dignity all converging. Slowly, she nodded. Yes. My child's father is Damien, son of a wealthy entrepreneur. He and we had a relationship. When I became pregnant, his stepmother threw me out. I won't go into details, but it's all true. A collective hush fell across the studio. The host pressed gently, and has there been any legal action? As the father acknowledged paternity. No, Zina said simply. But I have proof. She slipped a folded document from her purse. After we parted ways, I had a paternity test done with some items of his that I managed to keep. The results confirmed what I already knew. But I never pursued him for child support or anything else. I just wanted to live freely, away from that toxic environment. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged astonished glances. The camera zoomed in on the paternity test results, partially redacted to protect personal details but clearly bearing the conclusion, 99.9% probability. There was no denying the truth anymore. Within hours of the broadcast, social media erupted. Some sympathized with Zina, lauding her courage. Others vilified Damien and Eloise, calling for accountability. The tidal wave of public opinion was relentless, with many urging that Zina's child deserved formal recognition and financial support. Zina, however, felt a strange sense of calm. Finally, the truth is out. She no longer had to hide in the shadows of whispered rumors. Whatever came next, she told herself, she would face head-on. In a sense, the cameras had become her ally, shining a light on the secrets that once cast her in darkness. But as she soon learned, the unveiling of truth was only the first step in a more complicated dance of justice. The news hit Damien's father like a thunderbolt. Though he had distanced himself from Damien, the scandal now threatened the family's entire business empire. Shareholders worried about the negative publicity, and potential clients threatened to back out of deals. It wasn't just a matter of personal reputation anymore, it was corporate survival. Eloise, too, faced backlash. Community organizations she once supported quietly rescinded invitations, not wanting to be associated with her alleged actions. She tried to mitigate the damage, appearing on smaller talk shows to defend herself, claiming that Zina's pregnancy was an unfortunate situation, but denying any wrongdoing. Yet the paternity test results spoke volumes. Under immense pressure, Damian's father finally acted. He summoned Damian to a tense boardroom meeting. "Sit down," he barked, not even glancing up from the documents spread across the conference table. Damian shuffled in, shoulders slumped. He hadn't slept in days, grappling with his guilt and the legal complications that now loomed. "Dad, Silence," his father snapped, holding up a hand. "I just spoke to our legal team. This fiasco has cost us more than you could ever repay. If the courts decide we are liable for child support and additional damages, it could be millions. Our image is already tarnished." Damian sank into a chair, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I never wanted this." "No. Then perhaps you shouldn't have impregnated the housekeeper's daughter and left her to fend for herself." His father's voice dripped with disgust. "You've disgraced this family. Effective immediately, I'm cutting you out of my will. I'm also transferring a portion of the family shares to the child." He tossed a folder across the table. "My lawyers assure me this is necessary for damage control." Damian's eyes went wide. "You're giving shares to Zina's baby?" His father glowered. "It's about preserving the company's future. We accept responsibility, and in return, the public sees we're doing the right thing. We'll negotiate an agreement with Zina's lawyers. Eloise is another matter. I'm in discussions with her regarding a separation of assets." He paused, leaning forward. "As for you, Damian, you're on your own. I will not have a spineless son dragging down this empire any further." The harsh words stung, but deep inside, Damian knew he deserved them. He left the boardroom feeling emptier than ever. "I've lost everything, including the chance to be a real father." Meanwhile, news broke that the child, Zina's unborn baby, would be the youngest shareholder of one of the city's largest enterprises. The media had a field day with headlines like, "From homeless to heir, how one child changed everything." Zina, however, was overwhelmed. Lawyers contacted her daily, offering settlement deals and trust funds. She didn't know how to navigate this new reality. She feared that the same people who once discarded her would now try to control her and her child through financial leverage. Yet, a seasoned lawyer at the foundation guided her carefully, ensuring that any agreement protected her autonomy. In the end, the unstoppable force of truth had caused the mighty empire to wobble. But ironically, in their scramble to save face, they had handed Zina's child a piece of that empire, an outcome Eloise had once vowed to prevent at all costs. As word spread of the legal and financial arrangements, invitations for Zina to speak at prestigious events rolled in. Charities and business panels wanted her as a keynote speaker, a living testament to resilience and female empowerment. Her stomach fluttered with nerves each time she accepted, but she also felt an undeniable thrill at sharing her journey to inspire others. One such event was a high-profile charity gala hosted by a consortium of influential socialites, Eloise's old circle. The irony wasn't lost on Zina when she received the gilded invitation. She considered declining, but Mr. BORRAH and Neema both encouraged her. "This is your moment to show them how far you've come," Neema said. The night of the gala, Zina arrived wearing a modest but elegant evening gown. Her baby bump was no longer just a bump, she was just weeks away from her due date. Despite the roundness of her belly, she carried herself with poise, head held high. Neema joined her for moral support, equally radiant in a simple black dress. The grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and velvet drapes, reminiscent of the mansion's opulence. Guests mingled around tables set with fine china and gold centerpieces. As Zina made her entrance, she caught glimpses of hushed whispers and curious stares. Yet she refused to cower. At the head table, she found a place card with her name printed in elegant script, seated beside notable donors and city officials. As she settled into her seat, a hush fell across the table. None other than Eloise sat 2 seats away, her usually composed face pale and tight-lipped. "Good evening," Zina said politely, offering a small nod to Eloise. Eloise managed a forced smile, but her eyes flicked toward Zina's pregnant belly. "Good evening," she responded curtly, turning back to her conversation with an elderly society lady. Dinner commenced. The main course was a sumptuous feast of upcrusted fish, roasted vegetables, and delicate sauces, ironically, the kind of meal Zina might have once prepared at the mansion's kitchen. Now, she was a guest of honor, not the help. When the time came for speakers, Zina was introduced to a round of polite applause. She approached the podium, took a steadying breath, and began, "My name is Zina. Some of you may know me as a young entrepreneur, others from recent publicity. But tonight I want to focus on what we can achieve when we offer genuine support to those in need." She spoke of her journey, the illusions of wealth that once surrounded her, the betrayal, and the hunger she tasted on the streets. But she emphasized the empowerment center that helped her rise, the people who refused to let her give up, and her mission to pay that compassion forward. All the while, Eloise's face remained stoic, occasionally pursing her lips in disapproval. But she couldn't live without causing a scene, and she certainly couldn't contradict Zina without appearing monstrous. Zina ended her speech to a standing ovation. She returned to the head table, heart drumming in her chest, a swirl of triumph and bittersweet emotions coursing through her veins. Across the table, Eloise stared at her napkin, refusing to look up. That evening, Zina realized a profound truth, once they had cast her aside as a servant's daughter. Now, she sat at the same table, not as a beggar, but as a respected voice for change. The shift in power was palpable, and while it didn't erase the past, it heralded a new chapter in which Zina refused to be overshadowed again. Zina returned from the gala in a state of emotional exhaustion. She placed a protective hand over her swollen belly, brimming with relief that the event had concluded without further confrontation from Eloise. As she sank onto her bed in the dome-like apartment she now occupied near the center, her phone buzzed. She picked it up to see a series of text messages from an unfamiliar number. "Zina, it's me, Damien. Please, I need to talk to you. I'm so sorry for everything. Please give me a chance to explain." Zina stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She hadn't spoken with Damien since that terrible night she was thrown out. She was torn between anger, curiosity, and a lingering sadness. Finally, she responded with a cut. "I'm not interested in hearing excuses." Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. Some were long apologies, detailing how he had spiraled into debt and misery. Others were short and desperate, pleading for forgiveness or at least a conversation. Zina remained firm, focusing on her upcoming due date. "I can't let him derail me now," she told herself. One afternoon, Mr. BORRAH knocked on her door. "There's someone here to see you," he said gently, holding out a sealed envelope. "He asked me to give you this." Zina took the envelope, instantly recognizing Damien's handwriting. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside were several pieces of lined paper, each covered in Damien's uneven scrawl. She skimmed the words. "Zina, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I was a coward. When my stepmother threw you out, I froze. I should have run after you, fought for you, but I didn't. Every day since then, I've regretted it. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I've tried to rebuild my life, but I keep sinking. I can't sleep at night knowing I abandoned you and our child. I'm ready to face whatever consequences. Please let me be part of your life, even if it's just to support the baby." Zina felt tears blur her vision. She recalled the nights she cried herself to sleep, hoping Damien would magically appear to rescue her and their unborn child. But that was long ago, before she discovered her own strength. Now, his words felt too little, too late. Still, she couldn't deny the flicker of empathy. Damien had fallen hard. She knew the guilt he bore might be genuine. Yet, trust was not something she could grant lightly anymore. She folded the letters neatly and set them aside. Over the next days, she composed a single reply, short and to the point. Damien, I appreciate your apologies, but the time to stand by me was when I needed you most. My child and I have a future that doesn't rely on your involvement. If you want to be part of our lives, you have a lot to prove. Sincerely, Zina. She handed this to Mr. BORRAH to deliver. Whether or not Damien could truly change remained to be seen. For now, Zina had letters he never had the courage to send in person, and she had her own life to live, a life she built on her terms, not his regrets. A few weeks later, Zina gave birth to a healthy baby boy under the watchful care of the foundation's medical partners. She named him Jabari, meaning a brave. The delivery was tough, but as soon as she held Jabari in her arms, tears of joy and relief flowed freely. Over the next few months, Zina's focus shifted to motherhood. She balanced late-night feedings with the demands of running her catering startup. It was exhausting, yet every small success felt doubly rewarding now that she had Jabari to share it with. Meanwhile, she and Neema made a bold decision to open a small physical store, a cafe and catering service in a bustling part of town. With the prize money from her competition win and some microloans from supportive donors, they secured a modest space. They painted the walls a cheerful yellow, set up a cozy dining area, and hung up photographs of the foundation's community work as decor. On opening day, people lined up to taste Zina's cooking, curious to meet the local star whose story had captivated hearts. The cafe bustled with laughter and the aroma of freshly baked bread. Zina circulated from table to table, greeting customers and sharing her journey. Jabari slept in a small crib in the back office, occasionally waking to coos from the staff. Neema oversaw the register, wearing a proud smile as she interacted with patrons. Soon, the cafe became a community hub, especially for women from the Empowerment Center who wanted real-world training in a supportive environment. Zina turned the establishment into a place that hired graduates from the foundation's vocational programs, giving them paid internships and references. For many, it was their first real job after escaping dire circumstances. One afternoon, while Zina was finalizing the day's accounts in the back office, Mr. BORRAH arrived with a bouquet of flowers. I just wanted to say how proud I am of you, he said, setting the flowers on her desk. You've done something remarkable here, Zina. Zina blushed, resting a hand on Jabari's tiny foot as he kicked in his crib. I couldn't have done any of this without the center's support. Mr. BORRAH shook his head. Support is one thing, but you're the one who did the work. You built this life, not bought it or begged for it. That's why it will stand the test of time. She thought about Eloise and the mansion, how everything there had been purchased, status, decor, even people's silence. Here, in her cafe, everything was earned through sweat, tears, and resilience. This was her empire, small yet unbreakable. She realized that she had reclaimed her dignity, piece by piece, forging a future that glimmered with possibility. And through it all, baby Jabari was her guiding star, a living reminder of the power of hope, the child who sparked it all. Years later, the city held its annual Woman of the Year awards. Zina had been nominated for her entrepreneurial success and ongoing charitable work. She considered the invitation with amazement. Never would she have imagined that the servant girl who once scrubbed floors for Eloise would stand among the city's most accomplished women. The grand ceremony took place in a lavish hall, reminiscent of the galas she now frequented as a guest, not a servant. Dressed in a tasteful evening gown, Zina walked in with Jabari, now a lively toddler, and Neema, whose eyes beamed with maternal pride. Guests mingled, some even lining up to greet Zina with effusive praise. You're such an inspiration, they told her. Thank you for all the lives you've touched. When the award ceremony commenced, a hush enveloped the room. One by one, women leaders were honored for their contributions to art, science, education, and business. Finally, the announcer called her name, Zina, founder of Empower Eats and co-founder of the Women's Culinary Initiative. Applause thundered as Zina stepped onto the stage, her heart pounding with gratitude. She accepted the award, shimmering under the spotlight. Before she could begin her acceptance speech, she spotted a figure seated in the back row, nearly hidden by the crowd, Eloise. The older woman's face was unreadable, yet she clapped politely, her posture stiff. The opulent facade Eloise once held as a shield had faded. She was no longer the supreme mistress of a grand estate but a solitary figure overshadowed by Zina's rising star. "Thank you," Zina began, her voice steady. "It's an honor to be recognized tonight. But this award isn't just for me. It's for everyone who believed in me when society said I was a nobody. It's for the women who overcame hardship to find their voice. It's for my mother, who taught me resilience, and for my son, who gave me purpose." She paused, eyes sweeping the silent auditorium. "There was a time I was told I wouldn't amount to anything. But I learned that our worth isn't determined by wealth or social standing. It's built through every act of kindness, every ounce of hard work, and the love we show each other." Tears glistened in many eyes, including Neema's. Even Eloise seemed affected, her gaze dropping to her folded hands, as if finally understanding the weight of her past actions. Zina concluded, "To any woman out there who thinks she's powerless, remember, you can build a life that nobody can take away from you. You deserve dignity, respect, and the chance to thrive. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." A standing ovation erupted, echoing through the auditorium. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment Zina stood triumphant, the trophy raised high. As the applause subsided, she stepped down the stage, and the crowd buzzed with excitement, the aura of her victory filling the room. Eloise remained seated, an island in the sea of ovation. She gave a slow, almost reluctant clap. Their eyes met for a split second. No words were exchanged, but in that shared glance, Zina understood that Eloise, in her own way, acknowledged the magnitude of what had transpired. She had lost her hold over Zina years ago. Now, all she could do was watch. At the end of the ceremony, Zina found Jabari running up to her. He climbed into her arms, burying his face in her shoulder. She held him close, tears of joy trailing down her face. In that moment, everything felt full circle. The girl who was once a discarded servant was now celebrated, with the world watching in admiration. And while old wounds might never fully heal, Zina had learned the greatest lesson of all: real success isn't about avenging the past, it's about lighting a path so others can follow and soar even higher. With Jabari's warmth against her chest, Zina turned her back on Eloise's silent figure and walked toward the bright lights of her future, unafraid, unbroken, and utterly victorious. The end.